Welcome to the Wolf Talk podcast. We've got a very special guest today, someone that's blown up worldwide, idolized and loved by many with his message of boxing and message of life. We've got Frank Gilfeather. Thank you for joining us, Frank.
Thank you, John, for the invitation. Good to hear from you.
Things seem to have blown up a lot for you recently.
Yeah, it's remarkable, really. It's just been a whirlwind of a thing, since we started doing this on Instagram. It was only about 2 years ago, and we went virtually from a standing start up to 750,000 followers today. So that's been phenomenal. So I guess I'm doing something right. And the other thing too is we have a TikTok thing which we started. Firstly, that's at over 352,000 followers, but the Instagram quickly caught up and then overtook it. And then I started a year ago. I started on, well, just over a year ago, seriously started on YouTube, and now that's up to 80,000 subscribers. So it's kind of gone crazy, and I can't understand why.
Everybody seems to love the message you're putting out there.
Well, I think the key thing for me, John, is I'm just being myself. And I'm not trying to be some kind of ace YouTuber or social media influencer. I'm just a guy who wants to impart my knowledge about boxing, and also to, as you said, to encourage people who have given up themselves in terms of exercise to at least try and get back into the discipline and the rhythm of doing something 2 or 3 times a week, and even things like Tai Chi, which I really like. And it takes you 5 or 10 minutes each morning, no more than 10 minutes, to do some Tai Chi stuff. It gets the body moving and the blood pumping through your system, and you feel better for it. So it's kind of basic, simplistic things like that I'm trying to get across to people.
I think that's really important in life. I think, like you said, people do give up and think they're too old or not healthy enough to do things. And I think they just need to jump in at the deep end sometimes and get a feel for it.
Well, you do, and people. When you say to people, you should be exercising, their immediate thought is, "Oh, does that mean joining a gym?" Or "I can't afford to join a gym," because if you've got some of these private gyms there, their fees are, too much for most people probably. So there's that aspect to it. And then the other thing is, if they're older, say middle age or older than middle age, say 50s, 60s, and so on, they'll be saying, "Oh, I'll be mixing with a load of young people who are able to lift weights and do all that stuff on the treadmill." But what I say to people is, you don't need to join a gym. You, I've got this message as well. Anywhere under the sky is your gym. And what does that mean? It means walking, or if you're up for it, a little jog, but not necessarily walking. It's a brilliant exercise. If you open the front door, as I say, and walk for half an hour, turn around and come back again, you've done an hour, and you can build on that. That's really simple, and it doesn't cost you anything. So you could do that, or you could join a gym if you feel it's worthwhile, or you can work out in your house just by doing these little exercises. Plenty of them out there on the internet, as long as you're not straining yourself and putting stress on your body that you can't afford. So it's as basic and as fundamental as that.
If it's okay with you, what we like to do with our guests is take them back to the beginning where it all started, get a feel for the journey of the person. I think the journey's just as important, if not more important, than the outcome. So,
Well, yeah. Well, my journey actually was interrupted for years and years, decades, because I started out in my dad's boxing club. My two older brothers were in the club, they were boxing, and I was about 4 years old, and my dad would take me along to the sessions. And of course, I loved the atmosphere and was punching the bag as a 4 year old, just playing around, really. But what that did was it got me into boxing. And I could see, as I got older, I could recognize it's easy for me with hindsight to say this. Maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but it gives you a structure in your life and it gives you a discipline and a routine. So if you stick to these, okay, you've got to go training. Well, I don't feel like training. Yeah, you've got to go training. Because my dad always said to me, if you're not going to do it properly, then don't do it at all. And boxing's too dangerous if you don't do it properly in terms of working at it and training and being fit. So I would go, and so you get this discipline in your life and the routine, and you're going along, two, three, 4 times a week perhaps, and that just stayed with me. And I had a good amateur boxing career, never turned professional, rejected the offers from various managers at the time because it just didn't appeal to me. And I had to think about my job as a trainee journalist. And at the age of 21, after about 200 fights, winning numerous titles in Scotland, and then boxing for Scotland 17 times at home and abroad, various countries, including Bulgaria, Italy, Denmark, Ireland, one or two other places. And then at the age of 21, I thought, right, I've done that. And I was fed up by then, and maybe it was something to do with the training, the constant training, because as I became older and better, more experienced, and started to train with professionals away from my hometown of Dundee, then and I thought, okay, that's plenty. I've done that, and concentrate on my career as a journalist in newspapers at that time. Never went near a gym till probably my 50s. And then, as recently as, well, only in the last, say, 3, 4 years that I start to think about 3 years, I guess, start to think about the social media aspect. My son Paul would go to the gym with me, and he asked me one day, show me how to throw an uppercut. And I did that. And he videoed it and put it on TikTok. And I thought, well, that's fine. I'd never seen TikTok. And so every time we'd go to the gym, he'd say, show me how to throw a left hook. And he'd video it. And it just blew up. We went from a standing start on TikTok virtually overnight, within a week or two, to 50,000 followers, and so that's where we are today. That's the journey so far. I don't know where it's going to take us from now.
And what was it as a 4-year-old that drew you in when you first stepped into that gym? What was it that drew you to the sport?
Well, I don't know. I think the atmosphere for a start. Now, what you've got to remember is when I was 4, we're talking about 1950 here, and so things were pretty primitive. Guys, there were no tracksuits, there were no trainers, there were there were proper boxing gloves, but they were pretty primitive in those days. They were filled with horsehair, and you never were allowed to punch the bag wearing gloves that you would use in sparring. So you had these bag mitts, which were kind of flat and not very well padded. But it was the whole atmosphere and being part of something. I think that was a key thing. And I could see it with other kids of my age when I became, 10, 12, up to about 17, when many of them drop off. I've come across so many excellent young amateur boxers who were star youth boxers, winning championships, titles, and so on. But they drop off because, for a variety of reasons, because their pals are saying, oh, we're going to the pub, or we're going here, and well, we've got a date with this girl and that girl, or we've passed a driving test and, we've got the car now. why would you want to go to a gym? You're missing out on all this fun. So you get those guys that say, okay, they kind of go down that road. I never did. I try to have a right balance. And here's what I've got to say. I don't want anybody to think that they should be some kind of totally dedicated fitness fanatic when they're doing stuff or when they're boxing. But I think you've got to have the balance. I think you've got to know when to work hard and when to really enjoy yourself. But when the enjoyment part of it comes, you've got to ensure that everything is done in moderation and that you're not going out and getting drunk, at weekends and all that stuff, because it just doesn't fit. It won't work with what you're trying to achieve in boxing or any other sport for that matter.
But what do you think give you obviously that sense of community and feeling? Do you think that's what it gives to all people? Do you think it draws them in because of the community feeling, no matter what your background is?
Precisely. Absolutely that. You go in, you're part of something. You're a member of an amateur boxing club, and everybody around you, including the champions who are training there, they're the same. They're better than you, more experienced, doesn't matter. You're a member of the same club that they're a member of. And so you become part of something. And, for lots of kids, particularly today, I think, who may come from split homes, no father figure in their life, uh, underprivileged, they don't have the money to spend that maybe some of their peers do. But for those 2 hours or whatever it is they're in the gym, that doesn't matter. They can be the same as or better than other members of that boxing club. So that gives them perspective in terms of, well, I've got a talent and I'm good at this. And it's recognized by the coaches and so on. And so that kind of balances itself out. So you would get guys, you talk about this in any sport, where you can get guys saying, and even today, you talk to people, and football's a big thing, and you'll talk about guys that you grew up with, and invariably, the people you're talking to will say, "Oh yeah, he was a good football player. Yeah, he was. He was a good football player. Only he played at this level, and he played at a higher level, and so on." And so, what we find is that guys can equalize themselves within the environment of the boxing club and other sports, of course.
And did you find growing up, I mean, for me now being part of the boxing gyms and helping out with the youngsters,
Yeah.
I see it gives them an alternative life where they could go down the wrong path. It gives them something to focus on and something to do rather than leading that life of maybe crime or.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it did. That's what it. I mean, I saw it so often growing up in amateur boxing, and guys who were from difficult backgrounds. You would see the police coming up looking for them because they'd taken off petrol caps off a car and thrown it away and all that stuff on route to the gym. So these guys have got, and my dad was great from that point of view. He was almost like a social worker. And he would get these kids, and they wouldn't come under the verbal cosh or anything like that. What he would say is, look, if you continue down this road, you're going to end up in jail, or you're going to end up in Boston or whatever. So that's what you try to do. You're absolutely right. You try to give them a path where they can make a decision. Do I want to be part of this group of boxers and be friends with them? And, we're all kind of got the same thing in mind and the same goals. Or do I want to go with the other lot who are getting into petty crime? And so the least thing you could do is offer them that alternative. And you hope that they will continue on the path of the sport that they've chosen. Now, they might be extremely talented, but there's always that in the back of your mind that at any point they can go off the rails. But until they reach a certain age when you feel that they're in charge of themselves, if you know what I mean, that they can make their own decisions properly. I think they need guidance. I think lots of young people need guidance, especially, as I said earlier, when there is no father figure in their life, or their father is not the kind of father figure that you would want. So, the boxing and all these sports do play a significant role within our communities all across the world.
You speak very highly of your father, and rightly so, and how much he shaped your life. How much did he shape the life of others in the gym? Was he a father figure to people at the gym?
Yeah, he was. He was. Even the coaches. Now, my dad never coached. He coached me simply by talking to me in the house. Why do you do this? This is what we should do. And why do we do that? Because blah, blah, blah. But in the club, he was revered. And so, the kids would look up to him. They knew he was a firm but fair guy. And they would have realized without realizing it, if you know what I mean. But in the back of their mind, they would have seen a guy who, and certainly when they became adults, looking back, thought, well, where would I have been without the boxing club? And my dad, where would I have been? I could have ended up in prison or Borstal or worse. So what he offered was a safe place, a place where you could come, be part of his community, learn something useful, boxing, and get a little bit of experience in your life. Now, these guys who'd come, if you think about it, when we were boxing 10, 12, 14, 16, and so on, we would be boxing virtually every other week within our region. And then, if you got better, you would national experience. And so lots of these guys would never have been out their hometown, ever. They would never have been in a car, talking about those days. And now they're in a car and they're going to 20 miles up the road to Perth or Forfar or Montrose, all around the region, and they're boxing. And they're feeling confident and quite important within themselves. So the confidence bit is important because it's necessary for them to grow as people. You need that confidence without being arrogant or without being able to throw your weight around outside the ring, but being in the ring and being trained and being disciplined, you have that confidence, which will carry you through all of your life.
And you've obviously got your brand, the Noble Art, very well named. But what does the Noble Art mean to you? How is it the Noble Art?
The Noble Art, of course, comes from way back to the days of the Marquis of Queensberry, who invented the rules of boxing. So what we're talking about? We're talking about the 1700s here, maybe the 1800s. I'm not quite. I should have read up on this. But what we're talking about, the noble art of self-defense, which is to hit without being hit back. That's the aim. Now, you're never going to achieve it 100%, but that's what you aim to do. And this is where I stress that boxing for me is all about technique and style and skill rather than fighting, rather than brawling in the ring. It's all about using your brain to overcome your opponent. Now, if we go back to the Marquis of Queensberry, he invented the rules of boxing because he was watching guys, and I'm talking about noblemen here. That's where the name comes from. Noblemen who would want to fight, say, almost like a duel, where they would say, you owe me £100. Well, I don't have it. Right, we'll fight tomorrow morning, Sunday morning in the park at 7 a.m. And they would have guys with them who in effect were their seconds. And this is how boxing evolved. So he was watching, Queensberry was watching this happening all the time, fighting, but it was some of the fights could last for ages, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, until somebody gave up. And there were no rounds, no 2 minutes or 3 minute rounds. It was just fight to the finish. So he embraced this and said, right, we've got to get rules here. And so when the noblemen, guys who were landed gentry, wealthy, maybe earls or viscounts or whatever, when they came to settle their disputes, on a Sunday morning, for example, they would now have rules put in place by the Marquis of Queensberry, and they would fight according to those rules. And that's where the name the noble art came from, because it was primarily noblemen, wealthy guys. And that's where it came from.
And boxing is seen by many as a vicious, brutal sport, but in actual fact, it's a gentleman's sport. And it's not only about teaching you how to fight, but it's teaching you how to carry yourself in life. What do you think boxing gives people, whether young or old?
Well, it gives them, as I mentioned before, it gives them that confidence, right? It's an inner confidence thing. It's hard to describe, but like you're not going to be phased by too much in your life, because you've got this inside. I was a boxer. I knew how to box. Even although you weren't a champion, it doesn't matter. If you learn how to box, how to do it properly, and study boxing. Why are we doing this? Is what I do in my coaching. You don't do it this way, you do it this way. And I tell boxers, this is why you do it this way. Because it will keep you safer. And that's the number one thing for me, by the way, is self-defense. The noble art of self-defense. Why would you want to go in there and take punches unnecessarily? You go in there and first and foremost, you know how to defend yourself.
Definitely. And how has boxing changed over the years as you've been viewing it? Hello?
You froze there, John.
I froze a bit there. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. How do you think, from viewing it from back in your time to today, how do you think boxing's changed and evolved?
Well, I think the big thing for me, the big change is that, and I've been around lots of gyms in the last few years, and before actually, when I was still training. I was training hard in my 50s and 60s. And what I found out was that few coaches think about teaching defense. Many of them are focused on attack. And I watch kids being encouraged by their trainers during a fight. And these kids might be taking a pounding, lots and lots of punches. And I watch coaches in the corner waving them forward. Come on, attack. The guy's being battered. Happens all the time. And yet the coaches are telling them to go forward. Where is the teaching of how to keep their boxers safe? How do you block? Why would you take jabs in the face when you could block them? That's a big issue with me. Why would you stand there and take a pounding from a guy and you're trying to fight back when in fact skill and technique would keep you safe and would win you the contest? So I think the big change for me has been the emphasis on attack, but very little kind of focus on how to defend. So that's why you see guys standing toe to toe, and they come out. And I say to young boxers, you might win a contest, but you might have taken in the process, you might have taken far too many punches, and you come out there and you're going home the same as your opponent with a swollen nose and a sore head, because you've only taken one or two punches less than he has. For me, that's not a win. That's a kind of waste of time and a waste of energy. So, to answer your question, too much emphasis on attack and fighting, and too little emphasis on boxing and style and strategy and content.
Do you think boxing has lost an ounce of the respect factor with all the rubbish talking you see before and after fights? When before you embraced your opponent, do you think it's lost an ounce of its respect factor?
I think it has, and I often say that if you're sending out a message to young boxers and you're supposed to be a role model, I'll pick Tyson Fury for example, and he gave that 11-minute rant in the face of Alexander Usyk outside the ring, you know, a year or two ago, can't remember. And Usyk standing there looking at him as if to say, have you lost your marbles? Because he's screaming in his face. And I'm thinking, what does that say to those young boxers looking at a guy who was the heavyweight champion of the world at one point, Tyson Fury, and he's screaming in the face of a guy? Are they impressed by that now? Unfortunately, too many of them are impressed by that. They think that's the way to behave. Now, if you look at somebody like Usyk, for example, who would never go down that road of being abusive and offensive to an opponent outside the ring, he lets them scream in his face. He did it with Daniel Dubois, did it with Fury, and he just smiles and thinks, what an idiot you are behaving that way. He should be the role model that young boxers look to on how to behave inside and outside the ring. For me, that's what makes a champion. A champion has to have the whole thing, all the characteristics that make a champion. Integrity, humility, authenticity, all this stuff that's sometimes too difficult for them to find. Usyk's found it, Terence Crawford's found it, and others in boxing. So I don't know. I go back to the days when boxers would weigh in on the morning of the fight, by the way, not on the day before. The morning of the fight, they would have their picture taken and they would shake hands and say, I wish you well, wish you luck. And that would be it. It would go away. But now it's WWE stuff now. It's all about the promotion and the ring walk and the flashing lights and the pounding music. Got nothing to do with boxing and everything to do with show business.
Do you think from the promoters, from a money sense and the money that's pumped into it, do you think some of the boxers are forced into that rubbish talking and these WWE antics to try and sell the fighting?
Well, I think probably in the beginning they were. I think that, when the promoters came up with the idea and stole the idea from WWE to think, well, you look back to Muhammad Ali. He stole all his antics from WWE. He thought, right, I am the greatest. And this kind of got now. I remember it vividly when he first came on the scene in professional boxing after he'd won the Olympics at light heavyweight in 1960. And we were all horrified by his behavior because in those early days, he didn't, in my view, he didn't have the humor or the warmth that eventually embraced him as a person. And he became such a likable, lovable guy and funny, and you didn't take him too seriously. But in those early days, when he was trying to make his mark, he would behave like some kind of deranged, deranged boxer who didn't know what he was doing. Of course, he had all the skill and everything that you needed, but the other side of the coin was his behavior. I remember the purists in boxing at the time were horrified. Now, what was happened since then is that others have tried to copy that. And of course, they're not Muhammad Ali. You've got to be able to back everything up like that in the ring, which he did. And so they're trying to be Muhammad Ali or a version of Muhammad Ali when they should just be a version of themselves. So in the beginning, I suspect that promoters have been telling their guys, their boxers, come on, we'll flash up. We've got the flashing lights. You go out there and you whole thing. Sometimes it takes them about 10 minutes to get from the changing room to the ring. And then you've got the ring announcer who in the big fights takes ages. You get everything about each boxer. His record, how many knockouts he's had, how many titles he's got. You almost get everything, including his inside leg measurement. And you think, well, okay, just give us his name. We know who he is. Just tell us and let's get this cracking. And it's not great for the boxers, in my view, because if you're standing in there in a corner and you've left your changing room and your warm up, I don't know, 15 minutes before, 20 minutes before, because of the walk, because of all the carry on, and then the ring announcement, and eventually we get to the fight. Now, the boxer may have lost a bit of his impetus by then. I don't think that's good.
Do you think boxing has got a lot softer? I mean, back in the day, people would have how many fights a year, and now fighters are lucky if they have 3 fights a year. Do you think it's got a bit softer?
Yeah, and it has. In terms of, I say that often about the number of fights. Now, I'm almost sometimes trying to work out why boxers are only having 1, 2, 3 fights a year. Now, for the big names, that may well be a tax issue. For example, there's AJ gets anything between 50 and $70 million for fighting. I use that word wisely. Fighting Jake Paul. When will we, forget about AJ's difficulties at the moment. It's a horrible thing for him, and it must be hellish running through his mind. He's lost his two good friends. But if we put that to one side, if you're AJ, you have an accountant, would he advise you've earned plenty of money this year. If you earn X amount, within the next tax year, you'll really be hammered. You'll be virtually boxing for nothing. So the tax issue might have something to do with it. But the other thing is, and we saw this with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Remember, a couple of years ago, they did all their fighting on Twitter and through social media. And people were saying, are they ever going to actually, I'm going to beat you and I'll do this to you. Yeah, no, you won't. I'll do that to you. It's going on for 2 years. Think, yeah, can you not just fight and get it settled? So things take much, much longer than they used to. And of course, I haven't got a kind of world view. There are probably tournaments going on there are every week in some different parts of the world. But if you take an individual boxer, you just wonder how many contests a year will I get? It used to be, if you take a guy like Sugar Ray Robinson, for example, he was boxed. I remember looking at his record, and he boxed 3 times in 4 weeks once. And that wasn't unusual with boxers of that era. So yeah, it's it's different. Let's put it that way, and perhaps not so good.
And you touched on it there. I think I know what answer you'll give, but the whole influence of boxing scene, do you think that's ruining boxing, or do you think it's promoting boxing?
Well, you get this argument, don't you? People have said, we've seen it publicly with regards to Jake Paul, and you get all these fans saying, but he's brought eyes on boxing. No, he hasn't. He's brought your eyes on boxing because you're a Jake Paul fan. And that's what I say to them. But you don't know anything about boxing. If you knew anything about boxing, you would know that Jake Paul isn't a boxer. It's as simple as that. So he's now a busted flush. Why would any TV company or promoter or boxer for that matter at a high level engage with Jake Paul anymore? It's just a joke. And if in fact boxing did continue to engage with him, then you would get people like me, guys who have been in the sport for decades, who would just say, "What is the point? If this is what boxing's turning to?" But hopefully, it's not going to turn to that because we've got lots of great fights lined up this year. I mean, even this month, at the end of the month, we've got a fantastic fight. Teofimo Lopez against Shakur Stevenson. Two real good ring technicians. So there's hope there if we've got those kind of fights.
Do you think uh, back in the day, the best fought the best, uh, and it was easy made matches? Why do you think the best don't fight the best so much anymore? Do you think it's down to money? Do you think it's down to they don't want their record tarnished? What do you think pushes that?
Yeah, I think both. I think the money thing is becoming so ridiculous now. Now, and the other thing, of course, is oh, with this guy, they might think, oh, this guy is actually really good. He could beat me here, and so they'll do all the shouting and all the kind of histrionics, but they don't actually want to box him. But this brings up an interesting point, of course, because we had Turkey Al Sheikh, who's now become the premier promoter of boxing in the world because they've got squillions of money to throw at it. And joining forces with Dana White from UFC, who has said, if he gets his way, the kind of big money that we've seen paid out to boxers via Turkey Al Sheikh will be something of the past. And I think, well, good. However, you're not going to get the current crop of champions who have experienced the huge paydays. You're not going to get them saying to Dana White, okay, I'll take much, much less money. I'll take, I don't know what his ceiling was, a couple of $100,000 or $400,000. I can't remember, but it's in that territory rather than $6 million from Turkey Al Sheikh. But Turkey Al Sheikh is going to back Dana White. So that could see a seismic shift in the landscape of boxing, uh, where the money won't be as big. I mean, you've got ridiculous situations where guys, in my view, who are substandard. Now we look at the heavyweight division out with, and we know that the heavyweight division is just being recycled, isn't it? We're talking about Usyk, Fury, AJ, Daniel Dubois, and then on the outside coming up is Moses Itamu, who will be a world champion, I guess. But in the meantime, he's kept aside because he's still learning. Although I think he's good enough to go and fight for the world title. Maybe not against Usyk at this stage. So you've got all these guys swirling around the same heap. Oh, I want to fight Joshua. I want to fight Fury first. Oh, Wardley's come on the scene, but Fury Wardley is not at that level, in my view. Not yet. So you've got all this kind of recycling of the heavyweights. Everybody's obsessed with the heavyweights. And the heavyweight division are not, they're nowhere near the best boxers in boxing. Nowhere near it. They don't have the style, the technique, and all that of Inoue, the Japanese fighter, or some of the great Mexican fighters. They're just big guys with big punches. And what you see inevitably in heavyweight boxing is a knockout. And that's what the fans love. The fans love knockouts. They want to see an 18-stone guy hit the canvas, crash onto the canvas. It's exciting for them. But as far as the skill levels are concerned, they're not near some of the really top class fighters in the lower weight divisions. So I don't know what's going to happen to boxing in that way. I would like to see. That's my question. We talk about Moses Itamu. Who else is there in the heavyweights coming through? I don't see it. Certainly not in the UK. I mean, UK boxing is not very good just now in the professional ranks. But here we are, John. We're talking about the professionals. For me, it's all about grassroots boxing. That's what I like. I like to encourage, and I don't care if you're never going to be a champion. Come and enjoy it, learn something, and become a better citizen. Now, I think if we had boxing clubs being properly funded uh, at government level, then that would make a huge difference. Now, let me just jump in there and say this. The government funds the various sports bodies, and the sports bodies then fund the sports organisations within their umbrella or under their umbrella. So you've got Sport England financing via the government, financing football, tennis, basketball, boxing, all the other sports. My question is, what happens to that money when it filters down? Now, here in Scotland, I've been extremely critical of Boxing Scotland because much of the money that they'd been given had been frittered away. And they had a national coach who's now departed. And I always ask the question, why do we need a national coach in boxing? When these boxers are training under their own coaches night after night, and then because somebody said, you're now an elite boxer, you will go to the high performance center. We're going to take you away from your club. You're putting your trust in a guy who, and this applies to other organisations. You're putting your trust into somebody who's at a national level because somebody's appointed him. But is he any better? Do you feel a better boxer when you're training 100 miles away from your own gym? I don't think so. I don't think it's a good idea. And then, of course, I could underline that by asking the question, how many Olympic medals have we won? Recent Olympics. How many European championships? How many, and the answer is none. So all this money is being poured into boxing at an amateur level, and we are getting no return in terms of Olympic medals. So my answer to that is, do we need Olympic medals? I don't think so. So what if we've not got Olympic medals? So if we've not got Olympic medals, we don't need a high performance centre. We don't need an elite boxing team, guys who come from different parts of the country and meet only, once a week or whatever, or however long it is between their meetings. So are they improving under this system? I doubt it. I don't think so.
No, I think you see it on the grassroots levels from me traveling around gym to gym. There's no money being pumped into it. And the coaches that know their fighters uh, inside out, they don't get the opportunities for the fighters because there's no money backing them.
Yeah, that's right. So what does that mean? It means boxing clubs have got to go knocking on doors and saying to sponsors, can you give us 200 quid to buy this piece of equipment, or would you sponsor the boxing club? Or, we've got traveling costs to go and boxing this tournament or that tournament. That's no way to be. Let's give the money to the clubs, not to a national organization.
You said you had a long time out from boxing with your journalist career.
Yeah.
What inspired you to get back in the gym? And then from that, what inspired you to start coaching yourself?
Well, what inspired me to get back into the gym was the fact that I had to admit to myself that I was being a bit lazy, and it's easy, and I get it. I later worked in television, and I was at the end of the day, I was thinking, oh, can I be bothered? You know, doing without something to eat and going up the gym and joining it. And eventually I said, yeah, I have to do it. So I started training seriously. In my 50s and 60s, I was training 3 nights a week at the boxing club here in Aberdeen. And what I noticed was I was training harder than any of the younger guys, apart from their so-called elite 2 or 3. They were training hard. I was training harder than everybody else, and I was in my 60s. Uh, and then I watched the fact that there was little outside the elite boxers, about three of them. All the there was no attention paid to the other ones who were coming at the gym. So I took it upon myself just to. I was even welcoming guys into the gym, saying, "Come in." They were standing, looking in. Oh, what's going on here? Yeah, come in, join. You know. And then so the people who are on the gym just let me go on with it. And I was going around saying, "This is what you do. This is how you do it. And let's see it. We'll practice this." I found myself going round. And the longer I went on doing this, the less I had time to train myself. Most of my time is taken up teaching. I don't like the word coaching. I was teaching them how to do things, technique. And then eventually they said to me, "Oh, you should become a coach." And I thought, why? I'm a coach. Oh yeah, but you've got Boxing Scotland will mean you fill in the forms. I don't need to fill in the forms. I watch guys who have had zero experience in boxing, right? And I'm not decrying them, because they play a very useful part in the sport, because they're opening up boxing clubs. They're creating this space for young people to come and train. But they're becoming boxing coaches because they fill in forms. And I said, well, I'm not going down that road. I've been involved in boxing since I was 4. I know how to teach. I don't need somebody to rubber stamp my credentials, if you like, and say, okay, you've filled in the forms and you've ticked all the right boxes. I looked at the forms, and I could have got my granddaughter to fill them up. She would have done it. So what I'm saying is, I didn't need it. And even today, people are saying, "Oh, you get." I'm not going to go down that road. I'm too old for that anyway. And I would probably. They said, "Oh, what you do is you fill in the forms and then you go to 2 seminars over the space of a few weeks." And I said, "Who takes these seminars?" "Oh, so and so takes it." "Well, so and so's never boxed, and he's going to tell me how to coach. I'll come and tell you. Why don't you have me come and coach your coaches?" "No, that's a good idea, but we still need you to fill in these forms." So we never got there in the end, because of I was digging in my heels. I was not going to go down that road. However, I do know lots of guys who put in the time, put in the effort, and without them, the boxing clubs they're involved with would shut down. So I pay tribute to them.
I think with these uh, grassroots boxing clubs, it's not only important for boxing itself, it's important for life. I think in the UK, gun and knife crime has gone through the roof. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we're a big advocate here that boxing or some form of combat should be taught at a school level. It should be enforced, because I think people walk around with guns and knives, one, because of the gang related crime, but two, because they're scared. They're scared where you could
Yeah.
go into a boxing gym, how it used to be back in the day, and settle things in a boxing gym under a controlled manner, shake hands after, and it's done.
I agree with you there. I like the idea. We never really had it in Scotland in schools. I know you had it down south in England, that there was boxing in schools for many years. We never had it up here. I think it would be a good thing. Um, but here's the thing. I contacted the Justice Department after the last general election, when a man called Lord Timpson, he was given a peerage, and he's the guy who owns all the Timpson shops, the chain of shops across the UK. And he was appointed prisons minister. Now, the reason he got that appointment was because of his interest in trying to rehabilitate young people and people in prison. And what he did through his shoe repair and key cutting empire was he would give ex-prisoners jobs and train them how to repair shoes and cut keys and all the things that Timpson's does. I thought that's so commendable. I thought, what a great idea. But not only a great idea, you're giving these people a second chance. So when the last election, 2 or 3 weeks after it, and he was appointed, I thought, right, I'm going to write to him. I wrote to him via the Justice Department and said, let me do a pilot scheme for you. Let's set up in a young offenders institution, for example, an area of their institution where we can hang a few punch bags, no boxing ring, and I could come and teach these young guys. Now, what are we talking about? 16, 17, 18-year-olds, how to box. The end result, I would have hoped, was that certainly a reasonable percentage of those boys, you might kind of ignite an interest that they didn't realize they had. They might come out at the end of their term and join a boxing club and continue their journey in boxing. So what have we done there? We've created a decent citizen. After all, that's what this is all about. For me, it's not about making champions. It's making young people come out and become decent people through boxing because of all the things we've spoken about earlier, the confidence, the humility, the respect for your elders, your respect for your coaches, and respect for your opponents. All that's important. So if we got a percentage coming out of these young offender institutions, young guys coming out and saying, right, I need to join a boxing club, or they could get help in going into a boxing club and be accepted. Because we had it growing up, when I go back to my days with my dad's boxing club, we had a number of guys who'd been in Borstal, as we called it in those days. And then they kind of rehabilitated through the help of boxing. So I think that's a scheme I would still like to begin. I'd like to see if we can make it work and give it a year, for example, and see if we can make it work. So if Lord Timpson is looking in on this, that's my message. Unfortunately, the Justice Department got back and said thanks, but no thanks. And that was the end of it. But I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to go for it.
No, definitely. I think it could make a big change to the whole country. Obviously, now you've had your message and you've been constant with your message going through, but now your exposure, you're rubbing shoulders with world champions, celebrities, and you're getting more of a platform to put this message out. What is the message you want to tell to everyone? What do you want to encourage and inspire people to do?
Well, I want to inspire people to look after themselves, right? Now, if we're talking about boxers, young boxers coming into the sport, I want them to learn how to defend themselves and how they can avoid taking punches in the sport, right? I'm not into teaching guys how to street fight or what to do, and that's not my gig. I'm interested in teaching the technique, the skill, and all the kind of stuff that you need to enjoy boxing. Now, nobody enjoys getting punched in the face, but you can enjoy the kind of battle of wits that goes on in the boxing ring. That's what I want to bring. The other thing, too, is there are lots of guys who contact me every single day through social media and say, I'm 40 or I'm 50 and I'm still training. Do you think I could fight? Forget about fighting. If you're in that age bracket and beyond, I'll tell you something, John. I had a guy 2 weeks ago who was 62. And he said, can I come? He said, where are you? And I said, I'm in Aberdeen in Scotland. He said, I can't remember where he was from, hundreds of miles away. He said, I'll come to you if you can give me one-on-one lessons on how to box. And I said, that's fine. But listen, you're not going to be a boxer. You're never going to compete at your age. Enjoy going to the gym and keeping fit through boxing. You don't have to be, training like a champion. So my message is to these people, go and enjoy the gym. Be part of it. And I think the more that we get in our boxing gyms of the middle-aged and beyond members, I think it adds to the whole thing. And I think it's great for the young people as well to see these older people alongside them training. I think that's a great kind of combination, of the age groups. And that's what I'd like to see more of. And people taking care of themselves. If it's not through boxing, then through exercise. Never give up on yourself.
And what's next for you and the Noble Art brand? What would you want to achieve? Books, training programs? What comes next for you? Where's the end?
I wish I could give you an answer to that. I don't know. I mean, we've just played this by ear. In terms of where it's going. My son Paul does all the filming. He does the post. We've got these noble art bag mitts, and I'm very kind of passionate about those because I hate these sparring gloves, and I recognise that they've got to use them in sparring. But why people are wearing sparring gloves on the punch bag, I'll never know, because, as you know, the thumb is attached to the glove here by a little piece of elastic. So you can't do that. That was the first lesson I learned in the boxing club at the age of 4. This is how you punch. You clench your fist and you punch with the knuckle part of the glove. What we're seeing now is these gloves are like this, with their thumbs here, can't do anything about it. So guys are finding it really difficult to turn their hands. So they're punching with the inside of the glove. I get it every day. Oh, I've got sore knuckles. Yeah, which knuckles? Bottom part? Yes. Oh, how did you know? Because that's because you're punching with the inside of the glove. And so I'm trying to get them away from that. Certainly those guys who are not competitors. Why but and I've said it to the gyms I train in, why are you spending money on sparring gloves when you're never going to spar because you're too old and you're not a proper boxer? Enjoy the experience of punching the bag by being able to clench your fist. So that's a big thing for me. And we push that. We sell these bag mitts in 56 countries now. And we get rave reviews from our customers. I had one today from Perth in Western Australia. And he's showing me the glove and he's saying, this is fantastic. Has changed my life in terms of my training in the boxing gym. This guy's in his 50s. So I want that. I want people to enjoy the experience of being in a boxing gym, whether it's sparring or whether it's on the bag, and just having fun and keeping fit. That's the main thing. So that's all I'm trying to do. And what we've got to do is I do these coaching seminars all over the place. And I get invitations from right across the world. Can you come and do a seminar? Yeah, sure. Oh, great. Can we fix? Well, hang on a second. I say to them, you have to get me there. You have to accommodate me. I'll be away from my family for however long. I mean, you've got to take that into consideration. Oh, right. Okay. They think, I'm just going to jump on a plane and say, well, I'd love to do it. I love doing these seminars. I've done them all over the UK. I did a week in Lanzarote, somebody's training camp. I did one in Paris, and I did one in Amsterdam quite recently. And they keep coming in with the invitations. It's great fun for me. And it's great content for my social media channels because through them, I can let people see, what I'm teaching to these guys, and they can pick up on that and maybe take the advice I give.
If you could leave a legacy, what do you want your legacy to be known for?
I never, that I never even think about that. Honest to goodness, you know, I don't know what you leave, if anything. I mean, I remember when the Commonwealth Games came to Glasgow in was it 2014, I think they came. And the First Minister at the time in Scotland, a guy called Alex Salmond, said, this will leave a legacy for sport in Scotland. And I said, no, it won't. This will be here today, gone tomorrow. And there will be no legacy. And the argument was, oh no, but people will encourage young people to come in. They'll be training, they'll be joining all the different sports clubs. Never happened, right? Each sport has got to take care of their own thing. So you cannot expect, well, we're going to stage the Commonwealth Games, and you can't expect young people, especially today when we're talking about gaming and the phones and social media and all that stuff that they kind of going down the rabbit hole of. You can't expect young people to say, oh, I think I'll try that. Fencing, that seems a good idea. Oh, I'll join that gym. No, you won't, because that gym costs you £150 a month, and you need proper trainers, or you need tracksuits and proper training gear. And you're just a working class guy, you're not going to get that. But the boxing clubs don't demand that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The boxing club is come along, get a pair of gloves on, learn how to box. That's the beauty of the boxing clubs. My legacy, listen, I'll be forgotten in a fortnight once I shuffle off into the grave, but what I'm doing now is important and it's current. That's if you like, it's no legacy. It's what you're doing here and now. And then, as I say, you're forgotten in a fortnight. But if you keep it going, and we're on a kind of not a treadmill, because that sounds like it's too much of a chore, but we're on this constant journey. Content every day. We'll teach you something every day. And it's brilliant. I love it. And the one thing I must say, John, is that the engagement from the followers has been overwhelming, particularly on Instagram, where people have said to me, you're inspiring me to go and train again. You've inspired me to do this. And I've even had people, many of them, say, you saved my life. Now, I'm talking about guys with drug addiction and alcohol addiction, and gambling addictions, guys who were totally wrapped up in those addictions, and there was nothing else in their world outside them. But they look at the videos and think, wow, this guy's 80. I could do that, I could go and I can shadow. So I get these messages every day. I've started shadowboxing in my house, or I've joined a gym, or I've started to go for a little jog or a walk or whatever. That's music to my ears.
Well, I really could sit and speak to you all day. You are an inspiration to millions around the world growing now.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for giving us your time, and may your message continue to spread.
Well, I hope so. That's very nice of you, John, and thanks for having me on. I mean, if I get my message through to one person watching this, I'd be a happy guy. Thanks again.
And if I could be in half a shape that you're in when I'm your age, I'll be a happy guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Gilfeather and the Noble Art brand.